Good evening. Welcome to the Pearl Report. I'm Diana Lin. Multi-million-dollar private collections and public money to make Hong Kong a centre for art through the West Kowloon Cultural District. It's all been years in the making. Tonight, Chris Lincoln meets the people who keep works of art alive.
This painting of Sir Cecil Clementi had seen better days. He was governor of Hong Kong from 1925 until 1930. Stacey Belcher-Lee spotted the canvas when she came to Hong Kong to build the university archives in 2006.
It was framed into the woodwork in the wall in Lok Yew Hall in the main building. And I found out that it had been there at that time for about 65 years. We knew that we needed to get it out of there and that we needed to find a paintings conservator specifically to deal with this.
Enter Dawn Steele Pullman, an American who grew up in Europe and was trained there as a conservator of paintings. 4 years ago, she opened an office in Hong Kong. She continues to travel to work on paintings, and she gets some unusual jobs.
The painting was hung very low and the pet peed on it. I mean, I've had all extremes of strange things happen to paintings.
The work on Sir Cecil took about 4 months.
It had been in bad condition through the Japanese occupation. It had been rediscovered after that. They thought they had lost it.
The Clementi painting, to start with, was dirty.
Super heavy dirt layer on it, which also implied maybe it had been hidden somewhere or shoved away to keep it safe. You can see that I've done a cleaning test here to remove the varnish because there's a very yellowed, discolored varnish on it. So that's an initial cleaning test to show the true color of the skin tone underneath the dirty varnish. There were about 300 minute holes all over the paint surface where there were losses of the actual original paint layer.
And there were bigger holes, patched up at some point during a make-do repair job.
It appeared to possibly have had some bayonet holes or even bullet holes.
A bigger repair had to be made to the left hand.
Part of the preliminary testing is to look at the artwork in different lighting, and here you have it in a raking light, so you can see the raised edges of the hole and the old patch behind. And here is that same hole with the old patch, and when I removed the old patch, you could see that the hole really did go right through the canvas. And then the next step is to patch anew that hole and to fill it. In the process with the fill material that you place in there matching the texture of the canvas, so that when the eye looks at it later when the white patch has been in-painted, you no longer see the hole or the damaged area. And here is a specular light, where you put a light behind the painting to flood it and see what the problems are in more details.
When the work is complete, paint has only been added in areas where it was lost, from small spots to actual holes. Otherwise, it's cleaning, including removing the old layers of varnish that makes it look fresh.
As a conservator, I think which is satisfying is that the colors are now bright and crisp again. You can see the contrast of the darks and the lights. The losses that were there, particularly in the hand and in the background, no longer distract your eye.
It's a university archives painting, hung for us in the much bigger University Museum and Art Gallery. On display nearby, an effort at conservation from an earlier time.
This is a set of Ming Dynasty blue and white ceramic bowls that were broken. I know the restoration was done in the 80s. I'm not sure what glue was used. We believe that the paint was a lot whiter to match the white body of the ceramic, but that over time it wasn't as light fast as we would have hoped for, so it yellowed. The science really is about knowing the materials well enough, both the materials that were originally used and then the materials used in restoration or conservation. And those should be reversible and they should be stable enough to, look a bit better than this material does 30, 40 years in. These are important ceramics, important to us. We show them among the highlights of our collection, and we use them as teaching examples, so we know they have been treated or mistreated, and we make that clear. This piece shows a very interesting old way to repair something. The repair very visible, the staples, the metal and slightly rusty staples are quite visible.
Hong Kong offers no formal training path for a budding conservator of art.
There's no studies program here, and there isn't one nearby. There are Putonghua language training courses in Taiwan, and there are a few new ones in China.
What I would like to do is develop programs here so that we can train local students. Our University Museum and Art Gallery has offered small workshops in conservation. These are workshops for existing professionals, but also for younger people who are just beginning to possibly think about this as an area to specialize.
Conservators become experts in materials, whether it's paint, metals, stone, paper, wood, ceramics, and all the things those materials come into contact with.
They need some training in the physical sciences. They do need to understand chemistry. They need to understand a little bit of physics. They need to understand, in some cases, computer science in order to manage the programs that are being written to study the objects.
There are conservators working at government-run museums in Hong Kong.
The LCSD has over 30 conservators based in several institutions.
Paul Harrison was among them when he first came to Hong Kong in 1985, then when he returned after getting a master's degree in the UK.
Because of my master's degree in metallurgy, I was the senior metals conservator from 1996 to 2003.
That's when he says a series of contracts with government ran out, and he went into business for himself. The LCSD, he says, sends people overseas to be trained.
They take usually chemistry graduates, they train them for several years in-house, and then they send them overseas to do the basic one-year course.
Paul had completed his conservation degree in the UK before ever working in Hong Kong.
The degree is called archaeological conservation, so I have to learn everything about all the objects that could be found on an archaeological site and how they can be conserved. Organic materials like textiles, leather, horn, ivory, things like wood, pottery, glass, stone. If you choose a material, so coins, I have to know how copper was mined, how you turn the mined copper ore into metal.
Paul does a couple of days a week with the Maritime Museum, which is not under LCSD, and he works for some collectors and other private interests like shops. He's not really competing with other conservators for work.
There aren't many. For us it means pretty good job security that we don't have many rivals.
One job took him to the Protestant graveyard in Happy Valley.
We're in the tropics, so you can only just throw a bunch of seeds up in the air and they'll immediately germinate, and when they hit the ground start growing. Because of the high humidity, molds and lichens thrive, plants thrive, and the stones are under constant attack. The Royal Asiatic Society, of which I am a member, suggested, Paul, you're a conservator. Why don't you restore some of the stones? We got some funding from the Lord Wilson Heritage Trust. I'm a member of the Hong Kong Institute of Architectural Conservationists. So I took a group of those members here and we restored 20 gravestones of the Armenian and the Russian communities. Angels are usually with Armenians or children, and this is the gravestone of an Armenian child. The main problem with this gravestone is that it had been broken into 6 pieces. One crack in this corner here, so this was loose. There's another crack here, another crack here. This was free, there's a crack here. This was loose, and this was loose. How tragic would it be if this piece would be lost? A lot of the aesthetics of this would be lost because it's a scroll-like inscription, and you're losing the scroll if this piece is lost. Being marble means you can carve out these fine details. It should be originally white, but due to it being in the tropics, after 5 years of it being cleaned, it's gained this green coating. This is the grave of the Russian Irina Elchenko. What happened with this grave is these four pieces of the nameplate were lying around here. So they would easily be lost, and then anyone from the family or the Russian community who's trying to find out who this is would have no idea. This would become a John Doe or Jane Doe. One of the main things in conservation is to get the right product for the right job. This is a good marble adhesive that's designed for the outside, so it's able to stay still white 5 years after it was stuck back together.
When we come back,
they're developing this brand new collection. They're building a museum, and in the conservation and museum world, you don't get that opportunity every day.
M+ brings conservators to Hong Kong. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Pearl Report. Tonight, we're peering into the world of conservators, the people who conserve, preserve, rehabilitate, and otherwise maintain objects of art and architecture. They're more than technicians. Conservators need to know about the objects they're dealing with.
Most art objects stay in their frame or stay on their display, and once it's repaired or restored, you don't have to worry about being handled. And books present an interesting challenge because the content in them is meant to be accessed.
For this book, simple access like opening it up and flicking through the pages might be tricky.
The ink is called iron gall ink. You can see that it's actually burning right through the paper. Even though this is an item that's already been requested by users, right now we have to restrict access until we can find a way to treat this. I think we're going to have to take the book apart, page by page, and treat each page individually and probably not put it back together. This is going to be a very big project.
Jody worked as a conservator at universities in the eastern United States before taking a job at Hong Kong U 7 years ago. The practice of restoring art is old, but conservation as a science hasn't been around that long.
And books and libraries in particular wasn't until probably 1966 when there was a flood in Florence, Italy. The Arno River flooded the entire city, and many artworks and libraries, documents were submerged, and conservators came from all over the world and got together to save these very precious objects. And it was after that that certain protocols were set up and realized there was a need for standardizing what we do.
On the mainland, she says, the practice is spreading.
They're building conservation labs. They're sending people out for training and bringing people in to help with the training, but it's not the full background that includes the theory and the ethics and the history behind. You might be a very skilled technician who knows how to take the tape off or repair the paper, but making those decisions, should this be repaired? The date of this book is 1713, and if this is the original binding, this is very interesting for us to see the sewing, how it was put together. Most likely, the end sheets are hand-marbled papers that were original to the binding. There are large areas of loss where someone actually vandalized this book. Presumably, there was a name here next to this date and maybe some sort of ownership stamp or signature on here that was removed. We don't know if it was done by a previous owner. We don't know if it was done by a dealer. When I decide to repair this book, I have to consider all of these things. Do I want to fill in these holes? It's evidence of what has happened to it before. I think in this case I will fill in the holes because they're very distracting.
This lab works with other parts of Hong Kong University on conservation, recently with the museum on its exhibition of Armenian manuscripts.
For that exhibition, we helped to stabilize a few pieces that were damaged during transport.
They're also doing open workshops on things like packing and handling objects in what is a growing art market.
3,800,000, 3,800,000.
More art auctions, more museums, more interest, and more people with training are coming to Hong Kong.
The M+ Museum at West Kowloon has 6 conservators on staff. They've all come from somewhere else. The museum building isn't finished yet. Part of the advance work for conservators is understanding climate outside in order to manipulate conditions inside.
Try to stabilize the climate and to reduce the fluctuation. Very often, the objects are feeling better in kind of a well-defined range of relative humidity and temperature. So I'm looking a lot at the observatory data, which is really interesting.
Even without a building, conservators are doing what they normally do in a smaller space, the M+ Pavilion. The Canton Express exhibition is another in a series to keep up West Kowloon momentum. The pieces were donated to the museum in 2013 and were last on display in 2003.
My immediate thought was just jump to the worst conclusion that, you know, perhaps it's broken, maybe there's parts missing.
It turned out to be mostly dirty, so it had to be cleaned carefully.
Even though you might be doing a task that's not super involved and, you know, very difficult, you still have to be very, very concentrated on what you're doing. Because there are elements that are loose and components that can fall out, and also the clear photographic squares can scratch really easily. So it's keeping in mind the whole time every action that you're taking.
At M+, I'm hired as a paintings conservator. I took care of conservation of the paint layer, which was detaching from the support and flaking. And the chickens were also very soiled because of the previous storage location before they entered our location. So I also cleaned the paint layer surface.
For us, it was really challenging to interview the artists, finding out what was in the exhibition 2003, and then at the same time understanding what is going to be shown in 2017. Is it a revisit of 2003 exhibition, or is it reinvention of 2017?
I am looking at how is the condition now, what has been done before, and what do I want to do now in order to keep this structure and to preserve it as best possible for the future.
Gisa Schwantes runs Hong Kong University's Architectural Conservation Lab, opened earlier this year. There is a degree program in architectural conservation, the only conservation-related degree in Hong Kong. We asked Gisa to find a building to talk about and settled on the so-called red brick building near the Yau Ma Tei fruit market. It was built in 1895 and is a Grade 1 historic building. Gisa has not done a deep analysis, but quickly sees signs of trouble. Earlier repairs have left a mismatch between the bricks and the mortar.
This wall was made with bricks and then a lime mortar in the joints and then another lime mortar on top here to finish the wall.
This is some of the original lime mortar between the decaying bricks.
This mortar has been replaced with a mortar that is too hard. It's much harder than the brick. Usually, the mortar between the bricks and a brick wall should be the softer part of the wall, where water can evaporate from the wall. What happens now, the water is forced to evaporate through the bricks. And why is this a problem? Because with water in the wall, also salts are transported. We can even see the salt crystal, these white spots. The zone where we see the damage is where water evaporates and salt crystallize. And these salt crystals damage the original brick. We can see here half of the brick deteriorated and the brick is soft bricking, falling apart.
And there are parts of the wall where old bricks have been replaced by new ones.
By using these newer bricks that are most probably a little bit harder than the old ones, the danger is that the older bricks then are under more stress.
Gisa is from Germany. She completed her master's in conservation at Hong Kong U 6 years ago, then joined the university. Her strength is paint analysis. She and the lab were hired by a conservation architect to analyze the paint finish on the window frames at the Central Police Station. This is part of a group of buildings being revitalized by the Jockey Club. Before the work started, the window frames were painted blue, going back, Gisa thinks, to the 1980s. The first of the police station buildings dates back to the 1860s. She says most of the window frames that we remember as blue,
they were brown or black.
Gisa knows this because she collected paint samples and put them under a microscope in the lab.
The oldest finishes on this window frame, brown oil paint, and then later the window frame was painted with blue several times, and then gray and white, and then again blue, and the latest finish that we have here is the white finish.
Go to the old Central Police Station now and you'll see the window frames have been returned to a dark brown color.
For the conservation architect, the original paint finishes are interesting because they are part of the history of the building, of the way the building was planned and designed and meant to look like.
Conservation architects, how have they managed their way through that if you hadn't had a lab like this?
It has not been done.
Well, thank you for watching our show. It will be re-aired on Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday, as well as online and on mobile apps. Until next time, from the Pearl Report team, good night, good luck, and good health.